I came across this section the other day just browsing the internet, and I wanted to save this little image treatment to my swipe file as I thought it was a pretty cool implementation here. They took what would be an otherwise pretty boring section, and by giving the image just a little bit of shape and then this splash of color behind it, they've made it a whole lot more visually interesting, and it's a pretty easy thing to achieve. Now, when I was going to take a look at how they implemented this, I noticed they just saved this entire thing as an image. In fact, we'll just go ahead and open this image in a new tab here. You can see they've just set up this to be an entire image. And that works for this use case, but it comes with a few drawbacks as well. If you wanted to swap out either one of these images, or if you wanted to use the same layout on another page with a different set of images, you'd have to go back into Figma or Photoshop or however you set up this effect and build the entire thing out again. We can actually recreate this entire effect just using CSS, and it's pretty simple to do. So in today's video, I thought I'd show you how we can build this out using clip paths and some pseudo-elements that'll make this system really scalable and easy to implement all across your website. If that sounds interesting to you, then stick around and let's get started. Now in my implementation, I want to put a few guardrails around it. One is I want to be able to implement this effect by just adding a single class to my element. This way I can reuse this effect however I want to really easily without having to go to a bunch of setup. So we're going to have to use some more advanced selectors and some descendant selectors in order to make that happen. But the benefit to that is anytime we want to add this effect to our page, all we have to do is add one single class or a modifier class to that to get us several different versions of this effect. That might make more sense as we jump in here, so let's go ahead and take a look at what we got. Here we just have our section with our wrapper inside of it. I've set that wrapper to a display of grid just so I could lay out my content with this text over on the left, and then the image inside of a wrapper over on the right hand side. Now it's important that we use this wrapper here because that's definitely going to come into play. So let's go ahead and dive into the first things that we can set up here inside the editor. We are going to have to write just a little bit of CSS, but it's not too bad. So I'm going to go ahead and select this wrapper here, and we're going to do a few things. First, I'm going to go ahead and give this a class. Now we're only going to be using one class to set up this image, and I'm just going to call this clip-img, and we'll go ahead and hit create, and we can start with a blank class. So on this class, I'm going to go down here to my position, and I'm going to change this position to relative. I'm also going to go up to my sizing here, and I'm going to pick an aspect ratio for this image. In this effect that we saw as our example, these were kind of tall images, and I want to keep that idea going inside mine as well. I'm just going to do a 4/5 aspect ratio. We won't see a lot change right now, but we're setting up everything we need to so that the image is slightly taller than it is wide. Now we want to get this image to fill in that entire container. You can see the container is quite a bit bigger than the image is right now because we've set that aspect ratio. The image is filling up the width, but because of the proportions of the image, it's not filling up the height. So to select that image, instead of going onto the image itself and giving it a class, I'm going to use a descendant selector here. Now I don't always like to do that, but in this case, I want to create a single class that's going to control all of this. So I need to take advantage of a descendant selector. So here under the More dropdown, I'm going to click on the New button here to create a new selector. Inside that, I'm going to type in a caret here and then type in img and hit create. And we can see with our selector right now, we're selecting an image that's a direct child of the clip image class. So here we can go down to our position. I'm going to go ahead and set that to absolute. We'll link all of our inset coordinates together and go ahead and put 0 on there so it's allowed to take up the full space. And then we're going to set the width to 100% and we'll set the height to 100% as well. Now we're not seeing that actually preview correctly in the back end here. Our image is not stretching, and I think that has to do with some of the editor UI when we're using these descendant selectors. So let's just go ahead and save this and see if it is working on the front end. We'll go ahead and go to the front end here, and we can see our image is a lot taller now than it was inside the editor. So we can tell that this is actually stretching that full 100% width and height, which is exactly what we wanted. Now still in the editor here, I want to go ahead and create that background color shape. So I'm going to go back into our main selector here. We'll go to the drop down and we'll select a new selector. And here I'm going to be using a before pseudo element. So if I click on that, it will go ahead and build the selector for us, which is just an ampersand, a colon, and then the word before. So we'll go ahead and hit create here. Now, anytime we're using a pseudo element, we need content in here. This time we just need blank content. So I'm just going to type in 2 apostrophes here. And then we can go into our position. I'm going to change this to absolute, just like we did before. And we'll change that inset to 0 so it can fill up the entire space. Next, we need to go ahead and pick our background color. And we can see as soon as we select that, it's gone ahead and put in this entire fill for our pseudo element, which is covering that entire container here. Now, obviously we need that to be back behind our image. So let's go back to our image selector here. We can find it in the dropdown since we created it. And we'll go down here into our position and we'll give this a Z index of maybe 5 just to bring it above the pseudo element. Now again, we're not seeing that preview here in the back end, but this should have done the trick. So let's go ahead and save that and refresh it on the front end. Now, as we refresh it on the front end here, we can actually see that peeking out at the bottom, but our image is on top. Again, I think we're running into some limitations of the editor here where it's not working with this Z index properly once we're using this descendant selector here. So it's just something you're gonna have to kind of feel your way through and double check your work on the front end. Now, if we look at our example again, we can see we have a shape on the images. We're gonna tackle that here in just a moment, but we can also see they're rotated slightly. I think what I wanna do is rotate that shape in the background and leave our image without a rotate on it. So we'll go back in here, we'll make sure we're still selecting that before pseudo element. So I'll go ahead and select that again. And we're gonna go down here to our effects, and under transform, we're gonna select rotate from our effects. I think something like 2 or 3 degrees will be fine. So we'll just go ahead and do 3 degrees. And you can see now that background shape is kind of rotated here. Again, we're dealing with that Z index issue. So let's go ahead and save it and preview it on the front end. And now we can see that background shape is in fact rotated, even though it's the exact same proportions of our image here. So the next thing we need to do is work on the shape of our image. If we look at our reference site here, we can see that the images aren't perfect rectangles. They've actually been clipped just to be a little bit off. So this bottom is a little bit wider than the top, and this kind of has a slant on it. That really gives this section some character, and we can do that using a clip path. So I've brought up the Clippy tool here. I'll make sure to leave a link down in the description so you can get to this. And here's a visual tool we can use to build our clip path. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pick this trapezoid one, and then we can move these points around to get them the way we want. Now, if we go look at this, we can see this top corner is a little bit higher. This bottom left corner is a little bit to the left and a little bit up. We can do something like that. We'll just bring this right one down a little bit. We'll make sure that this one's locked down in the corner. And let's see, this bottom right one, we can go ahead and make it further down and all the way to the right. So I think something like this is gonna work pretty well. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this entire CSS declaration down here to my clipboard so we can use it on our site. Now, we're not able to do the clip path inside the Generate Blocks editor. So here, I'm gonna go ahead and go into the customizer, and under additional CSS, we can go ahead and start writing the CSS we need. So part of the trick to this is I wanna make sure whatever clip path we use, I wanna make sure it's used on the image as well as the color block behind it. So in order to lock those two together, I'm gonna create a custom property here. So we'll go ahead and just target our clip img, and I'm gonna open and close our curly brackets. And here's where I'm gonna create this custom property. We'll just go ahead and do a double dash, and I'll do clip hyphen path. And then we'll go ahead and paste in that clip path we had on our keyboard. Now, we don't need this clip path colon here, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of that. But what we've done at this point is go ahead and created a variable we can use for our clip path that we created inside of Clippy. So now we need to apply that to both the image as well as that before pseudo element. Now I'm gonna go ahead and use nesting here because it's gonna make our CSS a little bit cleaner. So I'm gonna type in that ampersand and then the double colon and before, and we'll open and close our curly brackets. Here we'll go ahead and declare our clip path colon, and now we can use that variable we created. So to do that, I'm gonna do var and open and close my parentheses, and then I'll paste in this variable name we gave it, which is the double dash clip path. Now you can see once I did that, you might've been looking over here at the left, but you can see our shadow is looking quite a bit different now. I'll go ahead and cut this out and then paste it back in. And you can see this clip path is actually clipping our little block color in the background here. Well, we need to do the same thing for our image. So outside of this declaration, but still inside our clip image, I'm gonna go ahead and nest again. This time we're gonna do an and, a space. We're gonna use our direct selector, and we're gonna select our image. Here, we're gonna be able to use that same declaration we had before with clip path. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy that, paste it in, and we're using that same variable for our clip path. So now both of these are using that same clip path, and because we have the rotate on the color block behind it, you can see it's just slightly offset to it. Let's go ahead and save our changes here. We'll jump back into the editor. Again, I'm going to go ahead and save my changes and we'll refresh here. Now, because of those descendant selectors, again, the back end is still looking a little bit funky. So that's something you're going to have to deal with if you're using generate blocks and this feature. However, let's take a look at just how easy it is to apply this. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of our image wrapper completely. We'll go ahead and delete that out of here. We'll go ahead and add a new container. Inside of it, we'll add an image, and I'll just grab a different image from my image library. I don't think this one's going to work very well, but you'll get the idea. Here, we'll go back to our container, and we can just type in clip img, and that's going to go ahead and do all that work we did just a second ago, all by just adding the one selector. So now if we view this, we can see we have a different image in here, but with that same effect. We just used one image in our example here, but if we go back to our inspiration site, you can see they actually had two images next to each other, and they're not using the same exact clip path. And I actually think that makes it look pretty good here. So let's go back and see how we can adjust this to give ourselves two different clip paths to work with in case we end up with a layout like this where we have two different images next to each other. We'll go ahead and go back into our editor here, and I'm just going to duplicate the second container with our image. We'll go in here and just swap this image out. So I'm going to go back to our media library and we'll just grab a different image from our library. Now I do want those two things next to each other, so I'm just going to go back to the grid template columns declaration I set up in here, and we're just going to do this 2FR, 1FR, 1FR, and we'll make sure we have just a little bit of gap in between those. Let's go ahead and save that and refresh it on the front end, and you can see now we have our two images next to each other, but they're using the same exact clip path, which looks a little bit redundant. So what I'd like to do is go back to our second image here and give it another class that's going to change our clip path. So I'm just going to go in here and add another one. We'll call this clip img alt, so an alternate image clip, and we'll go ahead and hit create. Now we don't need to do anything here inside the editor, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. But now we have that alt class on the second image here, but not on the first. So we'll go back and refresh on the front end and jump back into the customizer here. So back into our additional CSS, what we're going to do is set up that clip image alt, and we'll go ahead and open and close our curly brackets. Now what we need to do here is give an alternate value for this variable we set up. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this variable name. We're going to use the same exact one here. We're just going to redefine it whenever somebody's using the alt class. So we'll go back into Clippy here, and we'll just kind of reverse what we did before. I'll bring this one down and this one up, and maybe bring this one down over here and this one up a little bit, just so we have a bit of a different shape. Now here, I'm going to go ahead and just copy everything from where it starts with polygon here. We don't need that clip path again. And we'll go back into the customizer here, and I'm just going to paste that in. And you can see the second image already changed. Now all you have to do is add this alt class, and you can use this alternative clip path that we've set up here. This gives us just a little bit of variation so we can use some different shapes, especially if they're close next to each other like these ones are. Now that we got all that set up, let's go back through the process of doing this again from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these two containers here, and we'll add it again from the beginning. I'll go ahead and add our first container here with an image. We'll go back into our media library and I'll grab this image. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this container, go back to this image, and we'll grab something else from our media library, maybe this phone image. And now we got both of these set up. Now, in order to do what we did before, I just need to add these classes to both of the containers wrapping the image. So we'll go here and we'll add clip image. We'll go to our second container here. We got that container selected, and we'll do clip image again. But on this one, we want to use the alt. So we also need to add the clip image alt. Now, the way we set this up, you are going to have to use both the clip image and the clip image alt in order to get the alternate one to work, because it's getting a lot of its styling from that original selector. We'll go ahead and save these changes here, jump out of the customizer, which will refresh this page, and you can see both of these images are using the correct clip path. This setup is a whole lot more scalable because we can reuse this same setup by just adding one or two classes if you want to use the alternate, and swap out the image. This means we can use it all over our site without having to go back into Figma or Photoshop to set all this up again. The CSS is doing it all for us, which makes life a whole lot easier. Because the CSS is doing all the work for us and it's not hard-coded into the image, that means we can easily swap out different images or reuse this effect all throughout our website without any issues. You could even set up custom properties to do something like change the background color of your little shape for the alternate version. Really, there's all kinds of different things you could do with this effect when you just start with this as a baseline. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you did, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you want to make sure to catch the next one, hit subscribe and we'll see you then.